Okay, we're going to go over the question on value and meaning here. Um, Here at the beginning, I'm asking you to really work kind of squarely within Nozick's definitions and the text. And that's really important that I can see you doing that, really kind of stepping into Nozick's world and that part of the reading and clearly, carefully articulating, explaining his definitions for both. You want to be able to kind of can get a nice concise definition. And then you can expand that and bring out more of the details and complexities from an initial concise, doesn't mean simple, but concise definition. So try to do both. Go through the chapter and maybe find a sentence or two where he seems to really be giving the closest thing to a straightforward definition for value and also for meaning. Then, add on to that and say, like, unpack it, so to speak, because that's going to be a kind of conceptually dense definition, something like meaning or value, right? So you want to kind of say, like, what do each of these things mean? And let's, like, point out some aspects to the different pieces of the definition, going over the definitions piece by piece, more or less word by word, and just putting what concepts are now being added with each little step. So do that. So then I also ask you about the supporting arguments for these definitions. This is philosophy, so we're always kind of only interested in what you can give arguments for. So the conclusions, should be some kind of like conclusion of an argument that such and such is the right or best way to understand meaning or value. Should be some way of defending it. So you can think of it that way too, if that helps. And when I ask for an argument, what's the evidence, and how does this evidence support that particular conclusion? So what do we think? When you look at the chapter, Nozick doesn't really just kind of bang out arguments in the way that we were looking at in the first part of the semester, like with Descartes and some of the Plato stuff. And I could, present them in the same fashion. Certainly, Nozick's paragraphs could be rewritten as those step-by-step arguments that we did with Descartes and stuff. He seems to intentionally be wanting to not do that. And I think if you remember back in the introduction, he says that philosophers typically develop theories that are these kind of precise intellectual figure eights and these kind of sharp edges and puzzles and stuff like that. And he's saying, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to kind of present this philosophical self-portrait. So part of what that means is that it's not that the views are different and that he's never giving evidence or reasons, but he isn't so much presenting it in that fashion. So I'm asking you to do that. So I'm kind of asking you to take him out of the context that he's writing in a little bit and see, like, well, is this a definition for which one could give a good argument? And there should be some stuff in the chapter. So one thing that we can say with the value, I can suggest to these beginnings of arguments, partial arguments maybe, that we can see right there in the text, and that you can build on these as really you're just following the definition with here's the evidence or the reasons. Nozick gives favoring these definitions. So kind of going on here, although we're still kind of early on in the question. This is important though, because this is where you're really kind of laying your grounding in the reading so that your analysis can be grounded in the reading. It's what you're doing here. Not only going through the definitions carefully, but then kind of pulling out arguments that we can find from the text, and that's more grounding in the text. So it's good. So as far as the arguments, with the value thing is organic unity. Then he introduces this idea of unity in diversity. It's kind of a longish discussion there, and what you want to do is kind of go through there and just kind of ask yourself, well, where does he seem to be giving the evidence to convince the reader that they should buy into this view that value is organic unity? I mean, not a lot of people in the history of philosophy have really said that, so at least not in those terms. So he should be giving us some reasons, as opposed to, let's say, something like happiness or pleasure, or like the form of the good. There's other things that people can say. Um, so, he largely seems to be giving what we would call like enumerative induction, of giving kind of a host of salient examples of things that are valuable and for which we can see they exhibit that structure of organic unity. So, that's evidence of a sort, kind of like rack up examples. So, maybe these are compelling examples, or given that there are these examples, he cites like mathematical theories or scientific theories rather, art, consciousness, other kinds of things. Maybe we could say there's no reason to think that other things that are valuable would diverge from these paradigm cases of valuable things, which do seem to have that organic unity structure to it. So maybe you could say those kinds of things. To be honest, I don't think he really does a great job of providing, what we would consider like a classic logical argument to it. We might still find the vision or the view or the definition compelling. We just might find it intuitively compelling, and maybe that's okay here. But I am asking you, like, what kind of logical argument could one give for these definitions, drawing upon what you can find in Nozick? And let's say this, and we'll move on. Whatever kind of additional logical support you would be able to give alongside whatever things that you can find from Nozick. So I really want to see if, how do what are these definitions, and how could these be made as like conclusions of classic philosophical arguments? That would be good if they can. So kind of like leave that for the moment. You can certainly criticize the the extent to which Nozick's really argued for these definitions. Like, he doesn't argue for these definitions in the way that Descartes argued, "I know that I exist." I mean, he really like worked for that, right? So he doesn't quite do that kind of work. And you can kind of leave it there. It might still be compelling or might not be. So what I'm next thing, moving on here. Oh, I'm sorry. So for the argument-ish thing for meaning, did that for the value, he does note this infinite regress that a certain way of defining meaning would lead to. So a fine thing to do would be to say, Nozick recommends his definition of meaning because it doesn't fall prey to the infinite regress that this definition of meaning does. Well, that's something that's right in the chapter. He talks about that. So you could go look at that infinite regress discussion he has kind of midway in the chapter that leads into his definition of meaning as the reason for it. Doesn't fall victim to this infinite regress. And he seems right about that. So that would be one selling point, you might say. Another way to think about the argument thing, you could kind of put it that way. Like, what are the philosophical selling points, of the definitions? Those should be reasons and arguments, but yeah. All right, so now we're going to ask you to apply this. And here I want to emphasize that I'm really looking for you to apply his definitions. And if you want to, you could add a little modification or an improvement if you think they need one before you do that. That would be okay. Just say that you're doing that. But really, I'm looking for you to still be working from the text and really all the way through for the most part. But there's still plenty for you to do in making the application. I'm really not looking for you to now enter your definitions and understanding of these and have that be the whole rest of your essay, for sure. Definitely not looking for that. Really, you're evaluating your knowledge and ability to analyze the course reading. That's what this is about. So, fortunately, there's a lot to say about these topics, so it's not that restricting. So, how could we see now either an emotion or a we, so this is going back to earlier chapters, as possessing value and meaning as Nozick himself has defined it. And you've given a pretty close discussion and analysis of meaning there, so you should have some stuff to work with at this point of the application because you've given a close explanation of the definition and you've looked into the arguments for it and you've been doing that. So this kind of gives you resources in giving a kind of thorough, rich, well-rounded, or whatever, rigorous application. So basically you would just need to note, be able to explain how, let's say, a fitting emotion would be an organic unity. We also, in order that would show it to be valuable, in order to show it to be meaningful, we'd have to show that that fitting emotion as an organic unity can also be valuably related to valuable things, other organic unities. So an emotion can itself be an organic unity that's related to other organic unities. And you would just have to be able to come up with the example of what these other organic unities could be that an emotion could be valuably related to. It's an organic unity, but to be meaningful, you have to have a valuable relation to something valuable. So what would that be? Well, who knows? It could be somebody else's fitting emotion. Maybe it's as examples or being an exemplar to other people that understand and appreciate your emotions and come to gain some knowledge about how to live from that. Or maybe it's in music or art that the emotion produces. We talked about the blues. I think a blues is a way of kind of setting the suffering, we call that kind of emotion, into a larger context where maybe even for value, it could be related to other feelings and states and memories and experiences of the same person in the telling of the lyrics of the blues, or even just musically, that it kind of integrates the person that way. So that might make it valuable. In terms of meaning, there's a whole social cultural history to the blues that you're kind of being part of when you are playing it or hearing it or having that kind of aesthetic experience. So maybe that could be a way of explaining how that kind of emotion is made meaningful by being put into a context that way. So you can come up with exactly how to do that, but you should basically have a straightforward way of saying what is a fitting emotion and how can we see that as an organic unity, and how can we then see that organic unity as something that could be valuably related to other organic unities. What does that look like? That's having a meaningful emotion on Nozick's view. Of course, along the way, you can comment. If you're finding something that either sounds plausible, insightful, or implausible, or uninsightful, you can make these notes along the way, but really you're analyzing Nozick's view here still, but you're bringing in your own analysis and application. Okay, so then finally to your life here, this kind of final parting shot, still using his definitions, how could your life have greater organic unity in it? How could your life be such that the organic unity that you are has more valuable relations to valuable things outside of yourself and thus become meaningful? So given who you are and what you're doing and what you're all about, what are like concrete ways that you could actually achieve organic unity in your life and to be an organic unity valuably related to other organic unities? So that I'll leave to you. But again, really I'm looking for you to still kind of keep Nozick's definitions. So for better or worse, that's what you're keeping as the thread of continuity here in the essay, and that keeps the thread of continuity. You can comment in various ways on it as you go, but that should be a clear and kind of non-optional theme throughout this question. Alrighty, there you go.